enforcement most of my career. I was the elected district attorney for 3 counties in Maine for 15 years. I was the attorney general and chief law enforcement officer in Maine for 8 years. I know good law enforcement. And that's bad law enforcement and bad lawyering to suggest that they would turn the tables around and investigate a deceased woman, deceased at their hands under very questionable circumstances. It's outrageous. The Department of Justice has been weaponized by this administration, just like ICE has been weaponized by this administration to do harm to whole communities. And now they've come to Maine and are terrorizing a lot of people in Maine and taking moms and dads away from their children, causing children not to go to school, people not going to work. They're dragging people from their cars. They've arrested a law enforcement officer off duty. Why? These are not the worst of the worst. These are people who are contributing to our community, people who are paying taxes and working and raising families here. It's ridiculous and outrageous and unconstitutional what they are doing.
Governor, Senator Susan Collins weighed in on ICE operations in Maine yesterday. Here's part of what she said. There are people in Maine and elsewhere who have entered this country illegally and who have engaged in criminal activity. They could be subject to arrest and deportation pursuant to the laws of the United States. And people who are exercising the right to peacefully gather and protest their government should be careful not to intervene with law enforcement efforts while doing so. Senator Collins also said that people legally in the United States should not be targets of ICE investigations.
Well,
and she did call on Congress.
But they are. These are people who are lawfully present in our state, who are being taken away from their workplace, taken away from their school, taken away from their homes in front of their children, and taken away from our communities for no good reason. These are not people facing criminal charges or who are committing crimes or charged with any criminal activity, none whatsoever. She ignores the fact that ICE has been weaponized to do bad things. This is not the nice ICE enforcement of 20 years ago, Susan. And I call upon Susan Collins to use her seniority and her power, of which she brags so often, as chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, to put a hold, to curtail further funding for ICE and Homeland Security until questions are answered, until they put a stop to this abusive behavior towards Maine people, towards Americans who are here lawfully present and just doing their job, paying taxes, contributing to our communities, raising families here. It is cruel and abusive, and it has to stop. And she has the power to do it.
She does. And I'm curious about the senator's response to DHS's Operation Catch of the Day, an operation that has targeted supposedly illegal immigrants in the state of Maine. According to their spokesperson, Assistant DHS Secretary Tricia McLaughlin singled you out, by the way, for you and your fellow sanctuary politicians for prompting the need for the federal immigration crackdown in the state of Maine. It is curious to me, Governor, as a former statewide elected official, lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland, that your activity in being concerned for the individuals under your charge as governor of the state, that somehow the best way to frame the conversation with you is to put up a catch of the day, as if the people in your state are fish, animals.
These are human beings.
To be caught.
These are human beings, men and women with children, with jobs, with families, people going to school. They're not some menu item on Donald Trump's State House dinner tableau. These are human beings, and it's offensive and ridiculous to call them catch of the day. And by the way, the so-called people with criminal activity, the ones they've caught are people already detained, people we've already prosecuted, people with convictions. Fine, but that's not what they're talking about. There are 1,400 people they said they're targeting. But they're not catch of the day. They're not even criminals, not even people facing criminal charges. These are real human beings, and they're going through the legal process. They're here lawfully present, and there's no way they should be nabbed and treated abusively like this, and our communities treated abusively like this. Yes, I stand for the right to protest, certainly. And I've said to the president, I've said to the administration, I've said to Susan Collins, we will always protect our First Amendment rights. We will always protect people who are protesting at this moment on the streets of Portland, Maine, and hundreds, by the way. We'll protect their right to videotape these encounters and protect their own identity, which are being threatened as we speak. So, and we will certainly go after criminal activity wherever we see it. We always have. We're one of the safest states in the country. And so, excuse me, but Congress needs to do its job and stand up to this administration and de-weaponize every federal agency, including the Department of Justice and ICE. Of course, we need immigration reform. I think every reasonable person knows that we need immigration reform, and we need a humane and reasonable approach to immigration that cares for the families who are here and cares for people who are fleeing persecution and violence in other countries, as the ancestors of many of us did as well. But that's not what's happening.
And little Liam in his bunny hat being used as bait so that his family will come out and have to contend with this administration. Governor, we have less than a minute left. At your press conference, you said that you had reached out to the president, but you had not yet connected with him. Have you heard from this White House? And if not, what would be your message to them?
My message is Maine will not be intimidated. I will not be intimidated. We continue to reach out to federal authorities to even just get a count for how many people they're sending, how many people they've sent, and what is the purpose of this ICE operation here in Maine. They have not told us, and they won't answer the phone. Susan Collins could pick up the phone and get some answers, I'm sure, but her statement is one of concern, as usual. Always concern, but no courage. She has the ability to pick up the phone and put an end to this, but she won't.
Governor Mills, before we go very quickly, other governors who have had their states targeted said they feel as though that the government is attempting to, their state is under siege. Do you believe that the government is attempting to wage war with your state?
Well, there's no real good reason for them to be here. We're taking care of our, people accused of crime. We're convicting people accused of crime. And we're trying to protect our economy, which Donald Trump is tearing apart as we speak across the country with these tariffs. He's caused the